shortcomings, being able to take it along and being able to give whatever they can. So that way also accommodated.
Okay.
Loving inclusivity.
Okay, inclusion and accepting people for whatever they have in terms of their shortcomings, both intellectually, physiologically, in any area of their life. Yeah. Anything else? He's got a whole list of them, right? So let's come with the tolerance. Give me a few synonyms with tolerance. There are two or three which are kind of very similar. Tolerance, humility, tolerance, yeah. Respectfulness, gratitude and appreciation, yeah. Reverence, okay. Self-control, discipline, yeah. Okay. Keep going. Honesty. Okay, a very positive attitude towards life, taking overcoming challenges without feeling depressed. Yeah, go on. Now you said it. Okay, so kindness and compassion, forgiveness is what he is doing. Anybody wants to know? The only one thing now, see, this is how you can be socially aware. That if the characteristic or the requirement of some of them has already been there, don't repeat them. That's what we tell the students. When we give them a problem, and if one student has explained the problem, and the other student wants to say something, he doesn't have to again repeat exactly what the previous student has said if that is all he wants to say. But if you have something to add to it, with all these qualities that have been discussed right now, then please go ahead.
So ability to deal with defeat or know that failing is okay, but learn from the mistakes and move on.
Okay, so learning from mistakes and not necessarily getting very depressed about this task is too difficult and I always fail and all that. So allowing for mistakes to happen and learning from the mistakes to ensure the next time you do the same activity, you are reasonably successful. Yeah.
To be able to stand your ground.
Okay, the courage and strength to stand for what you believe in. Okay.
I would like to add responsibility.
Responsibility towards an objective.
Towards an objective and also owning up what you have done, good or bad.
So take responsibility for all the mistakes that you may have committed. Okay.
And equanimity.
And the calmness and equanimity in times of difficulty. So I think we probably covered a huge number of characteristics which you would like in your children from a inner characteristic or a qualitative process that you would like the child to have within him by the time he or she is beyond school years. That is one. What about the outer qualities you want them to have? What are the outer learnings that you would require them to? Yeah. Economy, politics, and technology. Okay. So economics, technology, and politics is what he wants. So when he talks of politics, he's talking about everything: social politics, the civics, yeah, how a country is governed, for example, how you run societies as such. So he's given a broad stroke in say politics. I'm assuming that is what. Yeah, and technology. How does technology impact us? What does it do? How does it involve us in our daily activity? And how are we engaging with technology to ensure that we whatever we have to do in our daily life? And the last one was the economics. How do we actually deal with people? How do we deal with societies? How do countries deal with each other? What are the multilateral systems of trade, for example? How do you export goods from India and how does money come into India and vice versa? How is this entire monetary system uh, in the world operating both from the trade when goods go out and money comes in? So where does this money exist? Who is actually holding that money? How responsible are we? What are the terms of trade? For example, do countries like India and Africa, are we at a lower level of terms of trade in terms of what we actually deserve as against how much money we are getting for it? That's a huge topic. It comes up in class 12 by the way. So we'll come to that in a moment. Yeah.
Now with what Jayesh said, in economics we also have to become micro-segregated and see how do we take decisions, how does one make decisions?
How does human?
How do we make, we are looking at the data, take out,
Yeah.
weigh things and take decisions?
So how do we analyze the data that we are exposed to, especially in today's environment? Because you've got so many areas in which data is coming into you. You've got your social media, you've got peer group information, you've got institutions which are focused on this, like for example Google, and they're just dumping data into you. And how is all these parameters then impacting you as an individual, both in terms of your buying choices, in terms of how you socially behave with your neighbors, in terms of how you interact with the environment around you. That data analytics is a huge, another big topic, which is open to a lot of debate, and there are a lot of pluses and minuses in the way it is happening today. What else?
Survival skills.
Survival skills, physical survival or psychological survival, or both?
It's both.
Okay. So, psychologically and physiologically, how can we make our children strong from an outer learning process, which will then hopefully translate into an inner characteristic? So when we talk, to elaborate on what she said, the way I understand it is give them first aid, give them first aid knowledge. For example, if they get hurt, how do they, address it in the immediate moment? Second, give them psychological counseling or certain uh, aspects of helping them to go through difficult problems in a particular way. So it could be, for example, in Waldorf schools, there is something called a guardian class overseas. I'm not sure whether in India they do it, but once a week for maybe about an hour, 45 minutes to an hour, the guardian teacher, who probably takes maybe one lesson or two, or maybe four, 3 or 4 lessons during the entire year with that class, sits with the class and says, okay, now just tell me what's happening in your life, what's happening at home, do you have a problem? And then they have these conversations, and sometimes these conversations may require private sessions with the student because you can't discuss that in a class, and that also happens badly. But if it's something which is related to the class, maybe bullying or some sort of a obscene word or something happened between the genders which was not appropriate, all that can be discussed with the children in a safe environment. So creating those safe environments for the children gives them the confidence that they can trust you as an adult. Without going back to the necessarily always going. I'm not saying don't get the parents involved. There are situations where parents have to get involved. But if the teacher gives the child an environment where he or she can speak his or her mind, right or wrong is another issue, but can just be heard, then I think about 70 to 80% of the problems, teenage problems, are resolved. It's really about 10 or 20% where you can't address it in this fashion. Most of the kids just want you to listen. As a parent, as a teacher, they're not expecting you to give them advice. You may, throw in a bit here or there, and it's a masterful art to be able to instruct a teenager to do something you want them to do. I don't know how successful you are, but I can assure you, the minute you are as a teacher or a parent tell them, "ये करो," they will say, "नहीं क्यों? Why should I do it? Who said so? Google में ये बता रहा है, मेरा दोस्त वो बोल रहा है, and I am experiencing something else. It has no relation to what I think is right." So then, how do you have a conversation with them to ensure that they really start to listen? Is an art which I think I'm still learning. And I'm sure as parents, you will also get to it, and you'll find a way to communicate. If you are lucky enough and your children are responsive to you and have a good connection with you, then it happens naturally. It's not even advice. It's just information which is going from you as an adult or teacher to them. So why did I talk about the guardian class? It was connected to the counseling. Yeah. So that is something which we do it very well in some order schools. Yeah.
Yeah, for the upper school, there is drama classes, we continue with the drama and stuff.
Yeah, the counseling, that's another very good point. See, when we say we are counseling the children or we are talking to the children or giving them safe environments in the class, the the other way to get all these, especially in grade 9, all these emotions out, you can get them to actually have a fight between two children, and they come and physically or psychologically they get into a huge argument and all that happens. Or you can actually design a play or suggest a play which the whole class can do, and then you can pick and choose the characters for each of them. And when the child starts to experience real anger in a theatrical play, on stage, you can be rest assured that all the emotions that are coursing through his or her veins is expressed, and the ability to relate to everything in a much more harmonious way happens naturally. So getting them to emote on the stage is a huge process where teenage issues can be handled. You just get them on the stage and they do it, they express themselves, and then they're back to normal and things are very easy for you in class. The common thinking, if you look at all this, is to show how good your children speak. That's something which parents expect. Oh, my child is on the stage. Or the teacher also thinks, oh, my children, my students are on the stage. They're able to recite a huge poem and they've been so articulate, so clear. The emotions on their face was so good, all that stuff. But what I am saying is behind that, what is happening within the child by emoting it is far more important than what you are seeing on stage or as the audience.
You should be expressing anything on this line.
Yes. Okay. So the other thing is bringing in the. So this is, for example, what I am about to show you is OSNA, the American Waldorf Association of North. No, it's the Association of Waldorf Schools of North America, OSNA. So they have made the Waldorf curriculum suited for the North American continent. Now, there are many things in this which we have to indigenize and see how relevant is all what's put there, and then change it to bring it into the culture and context of where the children are growing up and where they're born. We all agree that we are not only built out of something which is material, we're also built in what I call nature and nurture. The way in which I, as an individual, if I were to be born, let's say in America, and I were to grow up there, I would have a different characteristic. The way I speak to you, the way I relate to you, I'd be completely different. If I am brought up, say, in China or India, again, it's different. So the way in which nature or nurture it happens in particular cultures is very important. So you need to bring in the in history, for example, the local history, the Shivaji plays that you guys had shown on screen, and all the wars that he fought. Important because they need to know where what land they came from, and what is the experiences they've had in life prior to what is there for them in the physical world. All this is there with the back to memory. You may or may not agree with me, and I'm telling you a lot of controversial things. They already have a memory about what they have experienced in early lives. So they come with all that. But what you see is what they are experiencing right now in the present moment. So when you bring all these cultural aspects to them from the 100 years ago, 200, 500 years ago, you're actually bringing back what they have experienced, but it is very, very faint memory. It's not, I can't quantify it, I can't qualify it, and I'm open for uh, rebuttals on this and saying we don't believe in it. That's fine. It's not that you should agree with what I'm saying. I'm saying only look at the outcome. So when you bring in the culture of the land, it becomes such a strong possibility for the child to express himself in great truth, in great freedom, and joy. So all this that we have spoken from the outer world, I didn't hear anything from the scientists, the engineers. What do you want them?
Love for mathematics.
Okay, mathematical knowledge, yeah?
Problem solving.
Problem solving. Yeah.
You know, practically, you said there is a process of thinking.
Yeah.
There is a process of problem solving.
Yeah.
Just don't get the answer. There is a process to it.
Yeah.
There is a replicate better.
Replicate the process in a different situation and you'll get the appropriate answer. Yeah.
Computation also is a part of it. Sorry. Computation is also a part of it.
You name it and I'll show you everything is happening there. You come up on the board. Everything that we have discussed. Nothing which is the problem I'm telling you, I'm showing you an ideal curriculum. Now the problem is how do we think all these should be given to the children in Pune for this group of children with the resources that you have available in terms of teachers, equipment, time, whatever, examination requirements and so on and so forth. That is the next step. But all that you have just said is there. It's being demonstrated to you by virtue of having a curriculum which addresses everything, both the inner learning and the outer learning. Yeah.
Some kind of a eureka experience, even though it may be an established norm or established formula or principle, but it coming to children as a experience that they have done something and it just came as an awe.
Have you experienced such a thing any time before in your lives? What he's describing
Astronomy, in astronomy.
in astronomy. So, what do you can you describe it a little bit more?
I mean, when I came across like where NASA pictures of like the sun
Constellations,
and the
the sun,
constellation.
yeah.
I mean the from the telescope, I think, space telescope. That was like all in the theory, maybe very dirty pictures, real such high resolution images and the knowledge of supernovas and the life cycle of a star. This was small documentary about it in grade 10. Even though we knew a lot of it in theory, but then we really saw those real life images, the real pictures, that was very awe-inspiring.
So what I gather from what you said is when you actually stand outside at midnight and you look at the sky, there's something which is awe-inspiring which happens within you. You look at the constellation and you get a feeling that look, I am part of this. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, because I have always followed the constellation, like since childhood, and grade before and Orion. Since I was very young, I don't know. Until date, I follow that. Like every night, I will try to find Orion and this. Of course, you can't see this because here, but that's the thing. Like, it's like a part of wherever I am, in whichever city I am, try to find familiar stars.
Okay, so the awe that you feel connected to what you see in terms of what you know, when that connection happens, you feel, for want of another word, or a lot of awe, and you feel inspired, you feel elated, you feel different emotions, right? So this can happen in two or three ways. I can give you one example, and this is connected with sports, and this is basketball. Uh, the Boston Celtics. What was the captain of the Boston Celtics in 1980? Forget his name. Larry Bird. Okay. Our time, or maybe my time, not yours. Your time. Boston Celtics is a basketball team, and there are so many basketball teams. The Los Angeles Lakers, I don't even know the Miami something something. I don't follow them anymore. But this guy was the captain of the Boston Celtics, and they won the National Basketball Association Championship for I think 3 years continuously in the years 1987, 88, 89. And the basketball scene in the US is very competitive. I can't tell you how competitive. It's at another level. It's probably even more difficult than the Ironman in terms of the intensity of the players on the field. But anyway, they really give it all to win that particular championships, and the Boston Celtics were able to win it for 3 years, which is in itself quite extraordinary. Anyway, so Larry Bird, when he was being interviewed just after he had left the team, or maybe he was on the verge of retirement by maybe the American Broadcasting Corporation, someone, they said, what are the best games that you have ever played in your life? You know what the answer is yet? He says, I can count them on my fingers. There were about 5 or 6 of them. And in those games, when I played, this is all documented, it's not my story, it's his story. He says, in those games, when I was playing, I knew without even looking at all my players, all my teammates, teammates and all the opposing teammates. That means there were 10 players on the basketball court. I knew where they were. I also knew, and this is very surprising, I think, at least for me. I also knew even before my opponent threw the ball, I knew where the ball is going to go. It's going to go right across to the right court or the left court, and so on and so forth. He knew that. He also knew where the referee was, even though the referee might be behind. And the most surprising thing out of all these explanations is that he said, when I was playing in those games, it didn't bother me whether my team won or lost. It's another issue that the team mostly won. Out of those 6 games, they probably won all six. That he says I didn't care about that. I was playing because I was, for using his words, in the zone. And he also said one more very interesting thing. He said, if I were to shout out to my teammate, please go there and block that shot which is coming, the ball would never go there. So only he could do what is necessary. But he could not convey to anybody else what is likely to happen in the next 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. And he said, when I came out of those games, I just felt as if I, to use your words, or I was elated. He said those are the best games in my life. So what happens in world of education is we try to get that element of awe, and it doesn't happen easily. It's quite difficult. It's difficult for us, and the kind of awe that maybe I can give you. My example is when there was a chemistry teacher who came in 2017, and he was teaching us crystallography. So we had lots of crystals being formed, barium sulfate, copper sulfate, and all. I think the crystal he had mixed in 1 beaker was silver nitrate, if I remember right. Anyway, they were all forming crystals in the beaker, and these crystals, when you actually see them, have you ever seen these happening? You probably have. Jayesh, you know where they are forming, and they're all kind of random, right? And at one point in time, I could actually see where the crystal is forming, even before the crystal formed in material form. I don't know how to explain this to you. You have to experience it for yourselves. So then if you can get the children to experience that, then they are in absolute love for that topic, that subject, that teacher, the environment, the school, the parents, whatever. You don't have to do anything more. They will do whatever is required. And this kind of a feeling that I explained to you about Larry Bird and the small examples that she gave and I gave, I'm sure you all would have. Try and recreate them as far as possible. For that, you need a lot of trust. The one word which I was hoping that all of you all would say but didn't is the trust in life. If you have a trust that life will take care of you, then you can do anything. The minute you have these doubts, my body is too weak, I don't have the money, my parents are not supportive, my teacher is not giving me this, and hundreds of excuses. Modi Saab, everything is lost.
I want to add here what you were saying, like, I might not have experienced this in like physical way, but I have experienced in like you know in an intuitive way. It's like then it's like you are living your life to you feel like you feel you're guided. Even before that happens, you have a very clear idea that this is how this will pan out. With the given situation, like A, B, C, D, and you have sort of an idea how these two will come together and bring in the third situation. And for that third situation, what I need to know is sort of that tracing in the moment, like from here. So if I do this, this will lead to this, this will lead to this, for the third element to happen. So this is how you can. This is how I felt what you are describing, and that actually. Happens when you have trust sort of like you have this abundance mentality that things are happening for your good. It's not nobody who is out there to get at you or it's not scarcity. You don't feel the lack of resources mentally. Like God always like you feel that everything is provided for, provided you show up yourself.
True. So the aspect of trust comes in these lessons also. And what I wanted to bring to your consciousness was the fact just before we mentioned the trust. Yeah, there's this very nice statement by somebody. I don't know, maybe you want to Google it and check. That it is very difficult to, and I quoted this to you, I think, yesterday. Very difficult to defeat an enemy who has an outpost in your head. So if in your head you're already thinking, ये काम मेरे से नहीं होगा, that's the end of story. That's, no matter, even if I get the best, cricket players to advise you or give you the best facilities, if that thought is in your mind, and that's the biggest enemy, that is going to destroy everything that you want to do. And even if you succeed or complete the task, it wouldn't be to the extent that you are truly capable of. Which brings me to define one of the important things that world of education does is that it realizes the potential of the child to the maximum possible, provided you do all A, B, C, D, E, and G, and H. It's not as if it's a given. We all have to work, the parents, the teachers, the children, and the schools. And of course, by getting them to realize their potential, you're also making them realize their destiny. Or come back to that original question I told you of who. Who am I? What am I here in this on this earth for? So if you give them all the necessary tools to remove all these, dark thoughts in their minds about being incapable, incompetent, unable, etc., you remove these and give them the trust and capability of thinking that we can do this, then you will find that whatever is their purpose on this earth, it will be realized to a great extent. It could be anything. It could be becoming a carpenter. It could be, becoming an engineer or a factory worker or a bank official or whatever. It doesn't matter. It's not that they all have to be right on the top and be a Virat Kohli or become the prime minister of UK, Sunak or whatever it is. But whatever it is that they have decided to come onto this earth to fulfill, they will find it not very difficult to do. So realizing one's potential is extremely important. Then what else can I tell you on? I made quite a lot of notes, but we'll come back to now more mundane issues of class 9. That is where you guys are focused on.
Jayesh, where would ability to listen come? Outer skills, inner skills?
Where does?
Ability to listen.
Yeah, the ability to listen comes in. You're talking about high school?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so it comes in, I think in some of the qualities that you mentioned, social awareness, empathy, compassion, because the ability to listen is not just listening through your ears, that is one part of it. The ability to sense the discomfort of the other person and how to address that discomfort in a way that the entire environment is harmonized, right? So that's also listening. When I'm looking at you, I'm not just looking at the color of the dress you're in. I'm also trying to sense how does she feel, what does she think. So when I'm looking at you, I'm seeing certain things which probably you're not articulating with your the words in your mouth, but it's a kind of visual impression, it's a kind of psychological impression that I get, and that is also listening.
But all what you just mentioned, those are the final nuances of listening that one would go to later. But the first thing, let's say the preliminary stage of children of this age, just listen for them to, it may be just sit and listen or giving them those kind of instructions. How does one inculcate that? Because so many times we say certain things and those things are just as it is. I mean, it's not penetrating.
Yeah, that's the what I spoke about when as teachers you try to tell them 20 times. So for that I have three or four suggestions. They're not guidelines or instructions as such. First, I think most Indian parents, and pardon me if I'm being disrespectful, most Indian parents and Indian teachers they keep giving instructions, too many instructions, and they keep repeating those instructions. उधर जाओ, ये करो, ये करो, and you keep repeating. Once you give them the instruction for once, or maybe sometimes when they really haven't heard it orally, twice, end of story. If they do it, that's great. If they don't do it, there's a consequence, and they have to face that consequence. That's the first thing. Second thing is what we talked. You said nuances. You used an excellent word. We we don't seem to have that ability for that finer nuances between, for example, in painting between light and dark, there's so many shades of gray, or between green and purple, there's so many different shades. So these are giving you examples in life. But I'm saying even in our relationships, the nuances are enormous. If you can get the children to understand this nuanced approach to language, the nuanced approach to solving a problem, the nuanced approach to be able to complete a task in a way which is harmonious, then you will find that the children are automatically listening. That's what we hope that these lessons will be able to get into them as a quality.
What
You
can
want,
be the consequence of not finishing your new essay?
what could be the consequences? Well, I don't know
Like
if.
we are not assessing, doing examinations based on that. Like if their new lesson book is incomplete, it's incomplete. Can't do
Yeah,
anything.
true. So what you have to do then, I don't know, I can tell you what I do. So, and then, by the way, none of the main lesson books of your children are incomplete. I mean, they might not be incomplete in terms of what another child, but without comparison, the basic information is there. So your children don't fall in that category. But there are other children in other schools who definitely fall. They won't even bring a book. Sometimes the book is completely empty. Sometimes, there are 5 experiments and 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 missing. क्यों नहीं आया? Because I book was in my grandfather's house, or I went for a movie, or all those kind of silly excuses. Then you have to give consequences, and the consequences varies. I can only give you some of the consequences I have said. You can't, for example, as an extreme case, you can't come into the class unless your book is finished. But that has a negative thing that they miss the class where they are supposed to learn more, right? So there are all kinds of suggestions, and then you, instead of punishing them, then another way possibly is to give them incentives for finishing the book. And when I say incentives, it doesn't have to be material incentives, but you can encourage them in class and say, "Oh, what a wonderful book!" Show the book to the rest of the class and say, "This is what I would love to have." All the other students, for example. And then the other thing is, the team building issue of that when you're teaching a class, you're not teaching only one student. You're teaching the whole class. So how as a teacher can you build that environment of a collective responsibility is extremely important. The collective responsibility, I'll give you an example how it is done in class 10, for example, in the surveying lesson. And if I have time, I'll have a discussion with you. So, where one person's inability to do a particular job is going to affect the outcome of the whole group. And then the other thing is sometimes you don't have to say anything. The children themselves will kind of get involved in that process and tell the other children, say, you jolly well do it, otherwise this is what happens. Maybe you say, okay, at the end of the lesson we're taking you for a movie. If you finish this, they don't do it, everyone doesn't do it, movie's cancelled. I'm giving you very, very stark examples. In the US and all, they ground them, for example, or take away their phone for 1 day, 2 day, 5 day. And that's a terrible thing for a teenager in the United States. It's like taking away his life. I'm not sure how much it affects your children, but quite a few children feel as if you literally pulled their heart out by taking that. I've literally seen it when you're holding the phone, the child will hold it so hard he won't even give it to you. He's putting his hand out, but he's holding on to the phone as if कि वो गया तो हमारा जान नहीं जाएगा. So there are various ways. You'll have to see the way in which you can get them. But what I'm trying to say is, if you go through this whole process in the best possible way, or with all your limitations, you will find that this nuanced approach to be able to listen to the adult will form 80 to 90%. In these situations where they don't listen to you, it's fine. You can't expect them to always listen to everything you say. And you just go on with life. You don't need to get stressed. And that brings me to the last point as a teacher. Of course, now we said what we want in the student, and you've given me so many things. I think all that you have said, we as teachers must try and inculcate. So if I say I want my children to have trust in life, do we as teachers have that? What are the examples in my life that I have that I can say yes, A, B, C, D, I really trust them? Do I have that? Is it there in my hand, in my head, or can I make a note of it, or whatever you want? Similarly, all the qualities that you have just mentioned here, do we have it? That's a huge moral question for all of us because many of the things, and that I think is also one of the reasons why children don't listen to us, is because we say something, but when it comes to ourselves, we don't want to implement them. And if you believe that children are intuitive and they have a way in which to understand what you are actually telling them, if you agree with that particular premise, then you will understand the minute you tell them to do something which you are not willing to do, you have disconnected from them to a certain degree. Which is why, and who had come, yeah, Sonali was there. I was struggling to ski, right? But we cannot say that we cannot ski. Now, if I want all those qualities that you guys have said, and I want them to be strong, we want them to take up challenges, learning to ski is a challenge, like every other challenge that you all might have gone through. So if I, as a teacher, say, no, I'm not going to ski down that slope because I might break my leg or I might do this, and I tell them, be brave, does it really have any value? So they won't listen to me. I can be the most articulate, I can be, Shah Rukh Khan standing here, I could be anything, Tom Cruise, whoever it is that you visualize as a hero, and I could be telling them, but if I don't want to do it, and I want them to do it, you lost the game. You have to walk the talk. And you might fall, you might do this, things could go bad, but you have to ensure that whatever you tell them, they are listening to you because you are willing to be with them. And it's not easy. I mean, when you get older, of course, you find it more physically daunting to do certain things. But I think if we as teachers are able to do it, and I'm being honest with you, I'm not always on that level. There are times where even I say, अरे भाई उसको तो बोला है, but would I do it? Question mark. So then you slowly try and remove many of those question marks as far as possible. So it doesn't matter. You're not God. You're not somebody who will not make mistakes. You're not somebody who would not walk the talk. You make all that doesn't matter. But as long as you know that you're aware that this is where there is a slight disconnect between what I want them to do and what I am willing to do, then the next time you approach them, you will be far more honest. That's enough. It's a process. Okay, so shall we go on to oops? It's again gone. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you. Do you guys want a break? Because the next session is all about class 9. What are the main lessons you want to do? What are the main lessons that he has given and put up on the board? Are there any changes between what is an ideal world of curriculum versus what you guys have planned, I would say, in a rudimentary manner? That's the next session. Do you want a break? Okay.
We'll have a tea break and then come back in maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes.
10 minute break.
10 minute break. Ciao.
बन रही है, हो गई होगी।